The moment that changed everything happened on an ordinary afternoon, the kind of day that blends into every other one until something small cracks it open. Sunlight poured through the tall diner windows, bouncing off chrome counters and half-empty coffee cups, when a single sentence, spoken with quiet courage, shifted the course of several lives at once. Before the story goes any further, take a second. If you believe kindness deserves second chances, if you believe one good choice can rewrite a life, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to Good Deed Stories. Your support helps keep stories like this alive. Maribel Hayes had been on her feet since sunrise. By early afternoon, her legs ached and her smile felt heavier than the trays she carried. She was a waitress in a modest downtown diner, the kind of place where regulars came not for luxury, but for familiarity. Maribel knew most customers by name, knew who liked extra cream, who needed their coffee reheated twice, who sat alone because life had slowly emptied around them. Her life was simple and demanding. Rent was always due too soon. Her mother's medical bills sat unopened on the kitchen table because she was afraid to look at the numbers. And every shift felt like a quiet test of how much dignity she could keep while barely staying afloat. That afternoon, the diner buzzed gently with daylight energy. Businessmen on late lunches, retirees sharing stories, students tapping on laptops. Near the entrance sat a man most people pretended not to see. His clothes were clean but worn thin, his posture guarded, his hands wrapped around a cup of hot water as if it were something precious. He hadn't asked for food. He never did. He only asked if he could sit somewhere warm. Maribel noticed the way other servers avoided his table. She noticed the manager's tightening jaw. She noticed because she always did. Growing up, she had learned what it felt like to be invisible when money ran out. She remembered nights when kindness from strangers had been the only thing that kept her family steady. That memory never left her. When the manager finally approached the man, impatience sharp on his face, Maribel stepped in without thinking. She stood between discomfort and dignity, between policy and humanity. Her voice was calm, but her resolve was unshakable. She explained that the man was not bothering anyone, that he had done nothing wrong. That compassion did not disrupt business nearly as much as cruelty did. The diner grew quiet in that subtle way that happens when people sense something meaningful unfolding. Some customers stared. Others looked away uneasy. The homeless man lowered his eyes, prepared for rejection. Maribel felt fear rise in her chest. Not fear for herself, but fear that silence would win again if she stepped back now. Across the room, seated alone at a corner booth bathed in afternoon light, a man named Alaric Vaughn slowly folded his newspaper. He was known in financial circles as ruthless, brilliant, untouchable. A billionaire who had built empires and broken rivals with equal precision. He was accustomed to deference, to people bending around his presence. Yet in that moment, none of that mattered. What caught his attention was not the confrontation itself, but the stillness in Maribel's stance. The way she did not raise her voice. The way she defended someone who offered her nothing in return. Alaric had not planned to stop at this diner. He had chosen it on impulse, craving something unpolished in a world that constantly reflected his own power back at him. What he did not expect was to be reminded of something he had lost years ago. His mother had once worked 2 jobs, one of them in a diner like this. He remembered her coming home exhausted, yet still finding energy to help neighbors, to feed people who had less than they did. He remembered how she used to say that character showed most clearly when no one was keeping score. Maribel insisted that the man be allowed to stay. Alaric felt something unfamiliar press against his chest. Not guilt, not nostalgia, recognition. He realized that somewhere along the way, success had trained him to measure worth in numbers alone. And yet here was a woman with almost nothing, spending her emotional energy to protect someone society had discarded. The manager backed off reluctantly. The man remained seated. Maribel brought him a bowl of soup on her own time, using her own money, setting it down gently before returning to her shift as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But something extraordinary had happened. Not because a rule had been broken, but because humanity had been chosen. The rest of Maribel's shift passed in a blur. She felt eyes on her, felt the weight of judgment and admiration tangled together. She wondered if she would be reprimanded later. She wondered if kindness would cost her the job she needed so badly. Yet even as fear crept in, She felt strangely at peace. Some choices settle the soul, even when they complicate life. Alaric stayed long after finishing his meal. He watched Maribel navigate the room with grace, never once seeking attention for what she had done. When he finally stood to leave, he paid quietly and left behind something more than a generous tip. He left with intention. That night, Maribel returned to her small apartment, exhausted and unsure. The world outside her window glowed with city lights, but inside, anxiety hummed. She replayed the moment again and again, wondering if she had done the right thing, wondering if kindness was a luxury she could no longer afford. The next morning, everything changed. A call came early, just after sunrise, when the city was still stretching awake. Maribel almost ignored it, assuming it was another bill collector or wrong number. Instead, it was an invitation, a meeting, an opportunity that made no sense to her tired mind. She thought it was a mistake that it wasn't. Alaric Vaughn had asked to see her, not as a donor, not as a savior, but as someone curious enough to listen. When they met in a sunlit office overlooking the city, Maribel felt out of place among glass walls and quiet luxury. Yet Alaric spoke to her not with authority, but with respect. He told her what he had seen. He told her why it mattered. And he told her something else that left her breathless. He had spent years funding projects that promised returns, but changed very little. What he wanted now was to invest in people who already lived the values he had forgotten. He wanted to support Maribel's dream, the one she had buried under responsibility and fear. A small cafe, a place built on dignity, warmth, and inclusion. A place where no one would be invisible, Maribel cried, not because of the money, but because someone had finally seen her fully. Not just her labor, not just her kindness, but her potential. The weeks that followed felt unreal. Training, planning, support that came without strings. The diner job ended, not in punishment, but in transition. The homeless man Maribel had defended found stability too, connected quietly to resources that helped him rebuild piece by piece. None of it was publicized. None of it was branded. That was important to Alaric. Real change did not need applause. That on opening day of the cafe, sunlight streamed through wide windows onto wooden tables and green plants. Maribel stood behind the counter, hands trembling, heart full. People from all walks of life filled the space. Some came for coffee. Some came for connection. Everyone was welcomed the same way. Just before the ending of this story, take a moment and write in the comments who you think was truly changed the most in this story and why. Your thoughts matter here. Alaric visited once, quietly, sitting in the corner with a simple cup of tea. He watched Maribel move through the room with confidence born not from wealth, but from alignment. He did not interrupt. He did not announce himself. He simply observed the ripple effect of one defended moment. As the day wore on, Maribel caught his eye and nodded in thanks. No words were needed. They both understood that what had begun as a defense of one man had become a restoration of many. Near the end of the day, as the sun dipped and the cafe glowed warmly against the evening, Maribel reflected on how fragile and powerful a single choice could be. How standing up for someone else had unlocked a door she never knew existed.